board workshop of the Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District will be held Monday, June 19th, 2023, beginning at 1 p.m. in the Dr. Ricardo Chapa Boardroom of the McAllen Independent School District. At this meeting, there may be discussion by the board on the items and subjects listed as follows. Number 1, call the meeting to order. I have called meeting to order at 1:01 p.m. Number 2, public comments. There are no public comments. Before we go to item number 3, I just wanted to let everybody know, let the public know that yes, we are live streaming this. Yes, all 7 are present. 2 trustees, Trustee Kittleman and Trustee Saldivar, are via technology, and the remaining 5 trustees are here in the boardroom. So I will now go to item number 3, discussion of the 2023 and 2024 budget, 2023-2024 budget update. This is for Dr. Gonzalez, and I want the community to know that we've all had this information over the weekend. We've all had time to read it and ask lots of questions. So let's go ahead and begin.
Yes, ma'am. The Texas Education Code and Board Policy CE Local requires every local education agency to prepare a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues on or before June 19th and approved by the Board of Trustees no later than June 30th. And we are requesting action on this item. I did want to let our board know that this is a motion agenda item, and administration's recommending.
Dr. That's for the board meeting at
so
3.
sorry.
Oops.
That is my responsibility. I took his agenda
Sorry about that.
for the 3. He's under the 3. This is the one.
Okay. Let's jump on this one. The Texas Education Agency and Board Policy CE Local require districts to prepare a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues before June 19th and approved by the board by June 30th. And we have Mrs. Adele Felix, our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, who will present the 7th budget workshop for the 23-24 budget. Ms. Felix.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Today we present the 7th workshop for the 23-24 fiscal year. We will go over a couple of items, which is our budget adoption schedule, our cost savings plan and timeline, as well as the scenarios as discussed in the previous workshop. More on the budget adoption schedule. The district is required to have a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues on or before June 19th and to be approved no later than June 30th. I wanted to make a note that any discussion as far as compensation will be done at the subsequent budget amendment. Therefore, the book will remain the same. We did make minor adjustments based on some stipend changes, but other than that, the book remains the same. So, and this summarizes the 2 schedules. We adopt the general fund, the debt service, and at the option of the district, we have the capital projects as well as the accelerated instruction funds. At the last 2 workshops, we discussed the need to reduce our expenditures. The following summarizes our current plan and the ongoing process of it. Mr. Miller and I will tag team at this. We'll kind of break in as we discuss each phase. Phase 1 is ongoing. We recently reassignment of 11 positions into current vacancies, resulting in 8 cut positions. That's a savings about $849,406. As well as phase 2, which is ongoing. We've currently identified approximately 52 employees. That includes a projected loss through attrition. So not losing, but through attrition and not coming back. The estimated savings is $2,453,743. Through July and August, Human Resources will meet with each division to identify any excess positions we've identified and possibly an employee separation incentive program, which is an option, which we'll discuss in a couple of slides as well. We will have to discuss with legal review just to make sure everything's going. Mr. Miller?
Good afternoon. So I'm going to talk about the staffing reduction plan, which is phases 1 and phases 2. Phase 1 is really the identification and realignment of employees for efficiencies and savings. Number of positions identified to date as of June 16th was 11. As Adele said, that includes 8 cut positions. Estimating savings to date is $849,406. Target completion date for this phase is July 31st. Phase 2, identification of positions to be eliminated at the end of the 23-24 school year. Number of positions identified to date is 51. Estimated savings is $2,453,743. Target completion date for this phase is May 31st of 2024. Total estimated savings to date, and I emphasize to date, but this is going to be ongoing and growing. Phase 1 and phase 2 is $3,303,149. Staffing reduction timeline for June through August of this year. HR will meet and has met and continue to meet with each assistant superintendent and their directors to identify excess positions, savings opportunities, efficiencies, etc. HR will present these findings and recommendations to the executive leadership team, and we will coordinate with legal counsel on required documents, forms, etc. September 2023, HR provides a board report regarding this program, projected number of employees at that time, classifications, affected, estimated savings, and timeline for the remainder of the 23-24 school year. And this is a summary of the staffing reductions to date. I don't know if you can see that. I'll go the top line all the way across. So teachers and librarians, we have 1,599 teachers and librarians. That's 47% of our total workforce. Phase 1, there's 0 teachers identified at this point. Phase 2 is 41. We average about 40 teachers a year in retirement. So we do that through attrition. That equals about 3% of our reduction. And all the way over to the far right side, you'll see phase 2 estimated savings of $1.742 million. Dropping down to AE, this chart shows there's only 381 employees in the administrative education classification. That's 11% of our total workforce. We've identified 9 of those folks in phase 1, at least 2 to date in the phase 2, total of 11, 3% of our reductions, for a phase 1 savings of $683,433. Phase 2 estimated $165,565 for a total of $848,998. Administrative management, 88 employees total in that classification, 3% of our workforce. We've identified 2 of those in our phase 1, 4 at this time in phase 2 for a total of 6. 7% of our reductions are coming from AM. Phase 1 savings is $165,973. Phase 2 at this time is $373,840 for a total savings to date of $539,813. Dropping down to clerical technical, which is CT, 264 of those employees, which is 8% of our workforce. Haven't identified any at this point in phase 1, still reviewing. 4% in phase 2, a total of 4, which is 2% of our reductions, for a savings to date of $172,338. Instructional support, IS, 440 employees in that classification, 13% of our workforce. Haven't identified, we continue to have those discussions for phase 1 and phase 2. Dropping down to the auxiliary, the very bottom line, 609 employees are in that classification, 18% of our workforce. Haven't identified any, we continue to review those with the applicable supervision. For a total of 11 people in phase 1. At this time, 51 in phase 2, for a total of 62 phase 1, phase 2. For a total phase 1 savings, $849,406. Phase 2, $2,453,743 for a total of $3,303,149.
Currently in action and more in take into effect as we start the new year, but as we stand here today, we are proposing a hiring freeze and excludes instructional or safety needs, nothing to interrupt the operations of our schools. That's an estimated savings of $423,000. A position justification form, it's basically a vacancy replacement. What happened, what do we need, why do we need to bring them back, or we can do without. That's going to be part of the process as well. Removal of marketing and communication stipends totaling $12,500, which is the update that we provided in the budget book.
Yes, I'll be joining here with, hiring freeze and hiring process. So hiring freeze, instructional positions. No freeze on positions supporting campus operations. This includes campus custodial, campus clerical staff. Principals, directors still coordinate with HR director on staffing vacancies. Vacancies are being reviewed, on a case-by-case basis and are driven by the staffing guidelines. Oftentimes, the principals will hold a vacancy and they'll try to make other arrangements if necessary. And vacancies filled when necessary to ensure uninterrupted student support. On the non-instructional position, hiring freeze. Freeze on filling all vacant non-instructional positions. That saves $423,000. HR meets with the director and the assistant superintendent to identify staffing options to include eliminating or consolidating positions, realigning staff, etc. And the superintendent must approve the non-instructional positions before we post these vacancies. Let's talk about the hiring process. Instructional positions. Physician or director discusses vacancy with HR to identify if employee can be reassigned. Decisions are driven by the staffing guidelines. Principals and directors often pause in filling positions and make adjustments, which is what I was just talking about. Principal director submits a position justification form to HR. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And that, if approved, staffing requisition is submitted via Talent Ed. For those special funding vacancies, SPED, Special Education Department, Career Technical Education, and state and federal as examples, that's approved by the funding source themselves. They're not 199. Non-instructional positions. When a vacancy occurs, the director submits a position justification form to HR. I'll talk about that in just a minute. The assistant super for business operations, district operations, and HR will review their position justification form to identify staffing options. If operational requirements show the position needs to be filled, the applicable assistant superintendent coordinates approval with the superintendent prior to the vacancy being posted via Talent Ed. Position justification form. So this questionnaire is submitted to HR by the principal or director with the assistant superintendent's approval prior to the job being posted. Key areas on the form include questions such as, is it a new position, is it a replacement, what's the funding consideration? Talks about realignment, describe why this position is needed and how it aligns with our strategic plan, what is the impact of the duties absorbed or redeployed to other employees, and are there changes to the job duties or reporting structure? Go ahead with the stipend adjustment that's included. So we talked stipends, I think, twice before at least. This stipend adjustment is in the Marketing and Community Information Department. So we're deleting, recommending the deletion of all those stipends. Administration recommend those deletions. The task will be absorbed into the employee's job description, and the deletion of the above stipend saves the district. I got here $12,500 this morning, but in further talks with the director, it's actually about $20,000 because some of those previous ones that he recommended for deletions was not taken into account, the $12,000, so it's really $20,000, which is good news.
When was that? When did y'all know that?
What's that,
When
ma'am?
did y'all know that it was 20,000?
Just this morning, I learned the 20,000 because the two middle ones, you see the sports video producer and the sports video anchor. He had consolidated his duties into the other people when we was going to pay the stipend. And that's where the $8,000 savings come into play. So just eliminating them all total is a little over $20,000.
And Mr. Miller, just so the public knows, this is not the total number. This is not the total savings as it relates to stipends. There's actually greater savings just on the positions we've already previously discussed.
That is true.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is the third time we've talked stipends, so. Any other questions?
Other areas for our cost savings plan is our overtime plan of projected savings, and I'll go into detail in a little bit, of $840,940. Our staff travel projected savings is $425,565, and we'll discuss the new requirements, as well as we are introducing an 8% department budget cuts for all departments that are labeled 199T, which is all our departments, but here I have a note that says hold analysis of contracts. So what we're going to do is cut their budgets in the First Amendment by 8%. And we're going to hold it. We're not going to distribute it. The problem is some of them are tied to contracts. So this forces them to be a little bit more efficient with their funds. Then they have to come to us and be like, this is why I already entered into this contract. But the idea here is to keep as much of it from their budget. And then we'll analyze and adjust as we're going through. But you'll see that going as we continue with the year. Any questions on those before? Okay, overtime plan. I'll come back to the options. Overtime plan. Here we have cut overall overtime by 38%. So the reason it's 38%, 50% is all other departments due to a comp time availability software that I'll get into details, and the 25% of transportation. So 25% of transportation, based on our research for comp time, it could interrupt the operations of a school district if we were to cut all their overtime or give them a comp time availability, because who's going to drive those buses, you know? And so a lot of other districts, if you see the third bullet item there, it says most districts have excluded the transportation department due to the unduly disruption of operations. So what we took is just concerted, as well as the department still trying to work out how to schedule, making sure we don't break any hourly laws with the Department of Labor. This is our best estimate right now. So employees will be compensated for overtime at a time-and-a-half rate with compensatory time or direct pay. So what that means is not if I worked 1 hour overtime, I'm compensated 1 hour by time and a half. or being paid. Again, most districts have excluded the transportation department, and employees could, due to our current policy, can accumulate up to 60 hours of comp time. Comp time may be used in the duty year that it's earned, so it has to be done within the year, and if not, then they will have to be paid out at the end. Use of comp time may be at the employee's request with supervisor approval as workload permits or at the supervisor's direction. And anything exceeding 60 hours will have to be paid out at time and a half. And an employee shall be required to use comp time before using available paid leave, for example, sick, personal, or vacation. Now, as far as managing overtime, we have a comp time software that our new model within Skyward Business just became available this past month. And the demo is scheduled for early July. The good news is there are no additional costs to the district. Based on our relationship with our Skyward, as well as that being a new program, we will be working with them. So as far as implementation, we are estimating January 2024 because we want to make sure our payroll department tests it, verifies it before we roll it out. However, there's the option of flex time as we do that. Not only are we managing by saying no more overtime as long as there's a unique circumstances approved by your supervisor or director, but there has to be a unique circumstance and it has to be pre-approved. So flex time is also an option. So the payroll procedure states, with supervisor approval, employees may flex their hours within a single time clock week. It's very important that it's done within that 1 week. So there's some times that it's not possible, which is where the comp situation would come into play. Any questions or?
That works really well. The county does that. The county does flex time, and then, you know, if it happens that something comes up on a weekend and they didn't flex for it, they just get it on comp time, which reduces comp time too.
Correct. That's the
Next time.
Sorry, Lizzie. No, you can't hear.
As far as our staff travel plan, cutting by at least 50%. Now, this is a conservative approach. It's not just because we want to have a process in place. We review every request for travel by division, assistant superintendent, or executive leadership team. We're trying to sway away from just because I've gone, I have to go. There has to be a reason. We request, is there a virtual option available? What's the goal of the conference and/or training or the reason for travel? We limit the number of staff traveling, and when you go back and you train and you learn something, come back and teach us. Be the teacher of teachers. Yeah. That's our process going forward. We'll get it documented and have the pre-approval. Now we go to our options. Options that were previously were eliminating middle school blocks. That's 28 teachers, an estimated savings of $1,680,000, pending the coverage analysis, meaning, you know, who's going to cover the extracurricular, I don't know what the right term is, I'm sorry. Or eliminating 2 conference periods, middle school, high school, 48 teachers, estimated savings of $2,880,000. Also, an employee separation incentive program savings to be determined as part of the phase 2.
So in 2011, we had a voluntary early notification incentive program. So due to budgetary-related staffing reductions, next year administration is recommending and budgeting for a voluntary early notice incentive program during 23-24. Program will address declining revenues while rewarding employees for their loyalty and dedication. HR will coordinate required action with legal counsel and inform the board of the need for the program. Per TASB Legal, if a district is considering offering an early notice incentive, also known as early resignation notice incentive, it is important that the board is authorized it in advance of the school year as part of the district's compensation plan. This ensures the district is not making a gift of public funds in the middle of the school year to contract employees. That's policy DEA local. I'll give you some history here. Early notice incentive program was last used by the district in the spring of 2011 in 2 phases. You see phase 1 was March 9th through the 23rd. There was 235 contract employees, only 77 participated, and you'll see the breakdown of the target audience, if you will. So elementary, secondary teachers was a max of 170, 50 counselors, 5 librarians, 5 nurses, and 5 speech pathologists. They didn't get enough participation. Like I said, only 77 participated, so they went to phase 2, April 26th through June 10th of 2011. This is 150 all full-time employees. They opened it up beyond the contract employees, and 109 participated Professional employees was a max of 100, and auxiliary/hourly employees was a max of 50. And you see at the bottom there, the estimated savings from that program back in 2011 was $3,251,600, excuse me. So what does that look like? The early notice incentive, early resignation notice incentive. It's a cash incentive to employees who already intend to resign at the end of the school year in return for early notice of the resignation. So that allows the administration to start strategizing who do we need to reassign and to fill those gaps and fill those holes. Applies to probationary term or contract employees only. At-will employees can resign at any time. If resignation is voluntary and work is available, they're not eligible for unemployment. Exit incentive, this second part. It's a payment to an employee in return for the employee's voluntary resignation, and the assumption is that the employee intended to continue employment with the district. It's not a gift of public funds if the employee provides consideration for the payment, and this is where the close coordination with legal counsel comes into play as far as all the applicable documents. For term or contract employees, employee surrenders contract rights. Probationary employees is at the end of the contract period, and at-will employees must sign a release of claims. Administration recommends we offer this program in 23-24. That's all I have on that. Can I go ahead and do the substitutes real quick? So substitute teacher pay. I know we've talked about this a couple times. I just wanted to recap. So this is the pay history. So you'll see today we currently pay, it's $140, but at the end of the school year, rates it until the end of the 22-23 school year, and then revert back to the $125. Okay. So 22-23 total spend on substitutes out of Fund 199 at $125 a day is $1.2 million. And Fund 282, which is ESSER, paid the extra $15 a day, which is total is $140 a day. That's an extra $400,000. 23-24, we have budget substitutes at $125 a day for $1.2 million. So kind of two options. I've heard some concerns, if you will, from some trustees. Option A, keep rate at $140 a day. That's not budgeted. We just only budgeted 1.2. That would cost us an extra $400,000 to do that. Option B, which administration is recommending, is we reduce the rate to $125 a day, as previously board approved, shown on the previous chart, and we reevaluate our substitute program come early November of 2023, see if we're having challenges or issues. Any questions on substitute pay?
I was going to go back to the other, to the voluntary notification.
Certainly.
Early notification. So the savings that we experienced in 2011 was the $3,251,000. Is it $1 amount across the board, or how is that amount determined? Like how much we are paying each individual teacher?
Well, unfortunately, it's before my time, so I don't have the exact answer, but that's the total for the 186 participant.
But it would be one amount per, if we target like, let's say, my position or an accounting, I'm just gonna do accounting. If we can say we can do with one less accountant, right? And I have somebody on my team that is ready to retire, or they can let us know. It would be a targeted, there's one spot. However, if I had two, then it's the first two that would come in.
Right.
But once you meet that one, it's done.
But I guess what I mean is, for each employee, is it one flat fee that we're offering them?
Yes.
No matter what position they're in?
I'm sorry, yeah, that is correct. It's $3,000, I believe, was what was offered
Okay.
At that time.
at that time, back in 2011.
So that would be something that the administration would need to decide
Correct.
for. And so this estimated savings accounts for whatever it cost us to pay out all of those bonus, or all of those amounts.
It's the cost of those individuals retiring and not filling at that time in 2011. The jobs that were not filled.
But this dollar amount of estimated savings does not account for how much it costs us to make those payments to them.
I'm not sure, honestly. We can find that out.
The savings is in the fact that you're not paying those salaries. It's self-funded basically, because you're not gonna be paying that salary going forward.
Right.
You're
So,
taking it out of the projected.
right. But I guess my question is, how much did it cost us to run the program?
The net, like, what's the net?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was 109 plus 77 at $3,000.
$3,000.
Yeah.
Looks like.
That's more than I expected, like, to hear those numbers. I mean, you say it wasn't, we stopped doing it because it wasn't enough participation. I mean, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That amount of, I wouldn't have expected that amount of participation in something like that, but,
It would have cost us for the 77 for the contract as well as a full-time 109, it would have cost us 558,000 at that time. But I'm not sure if that amount has the net effect
But
of
we
it.
saved.
Right.
But we
3.2
saved
million.
2 point, if it didn't, we'd save 2.7 million.
Oh, taking
Yeah.
out the. Pretty
So
good.
I have a,
Go ahead.
I was gonna go over to substitute, but if you have something on this one. So on substitute, I know it was reported that we have a 95% fill rate, which I still find hard to believe, given that I know our teachers were covering second classrooms for other teachers. But one thing that was brought to my attention that I hadn't even thought about, I know we talked about permanent subs or long-term subs, and how much more they have to do than just the daily subs, because they are required for attendance and Skyward, which I hadn't even thought about and considered. So I have a really hard time going back down to the 125. I know the $15 difference was ESSER monies to get us back to the 140. I just have a really hard time going down to 125 when I know that it is still difficult to find subs. Plus, especially for those long-time or permanent subs, if they're not going to get an extra something for having to deal with Skyward and parents like me who monitor Skyward and make sure that our grades are up, input as soon as they should be. So I just think that's something that this board needs to consider for our substitutes so that we're able to continue to attract good subs, or many of our retired McAllen ISD teachers that come back. So.
Madam President, if I may. Going back to the question a moment ago, I don't know who asked it, it's a very good question. If memory serves, in 2011-12, when we did the incentive pay, I think it was $3,000 per individual that was within those groups. In other words, it wasn't a blanket for everybody. You had to be within those groups that were just shown on the list. And so if you figure if I added correctly, it was 186 individuals total took advantage. And if it was indeed $3,000, I'm going by memory, as we were discussing this Friday, I really promoted this. I think we should have done this really since 2011-12, probably at least one other time. But be that as may, if that's the case, 186 that's showing on that slide at $3,000 apiece, then that's $5,580 that it cost at that time for that program. The administration hasn't told us what the amount would be this time. I guess they're waiting for us to discuss if we're interested in what that amount might be. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So will you identify, for instance, like where you have the max of 170, max of 150, does that mean that you suspect that we are over in those categories by that number? I mean, not this, obviously this is 2011, but would there be a number assigned to teachers? We're going to do whatever number you decide, or and is that based on employment?
Yeah, a lot of it's driven through master schedule also. I know that we've talked about an option, and it's very clear that the board wasn't interested in previous conversations, but when you look at block, no block, that requires less teachers, so that would up the amount of individuals that we would need with regard to. So it just depends. As far as classification of teachers that have more than 20 years, more than 25, we can start to figure out how many teachers are at retirement age. And a lot of them are trying to get their last couple of, maybe their last year in as one of their top 3 or top 5. So this money just entices them to step out just a little bit earlier. So some take it, some don't.
And I know, Madam Chair, you mentioned last meeting about it contributing to TRS. Does this
The $3,000.
$3,000 it would as well?
Yes, if we look at more of the longevity, because they served their, yeah, they've served it, so it would be similar. But we'll have to make sure we double check before with the legal and everybody, our TRS coach. As far as the subs, as long-term, so we had about 129 subs doing long-term, and they went over about 10-plus days. So if we were to do, just for that portion, maybe not across the board, $10, we're estimating it'd be more of a doable, it'd be a little bit over $30,000.
That makes sense.
That would be,
I think
so
that's-
that would kind of meet.
Right. Okay. That makes me feel better.
And that is a good point. I mean, our long-term subs are committed to us. They could go to other districts and they stay with us. So I think that that's a very good idea in compensating that particular group.
Okay, as far as, any other questions on those?
So if we don't get the participation on a voluntary basis, what then?
Then we go with our plan, our phase 2, identifying and then giving them a year to let
so-
them know. No, the
okay.
plan continues, the plan continues.
Trustee Saldivar,
I'm sorry?
did you have a question?
Trustee, just asked it, but I guess the question I'm asking is that then there is going to be a component of involuntary separation, but with involuntary, it's not going to be any sort of, incentive pay for that, for those individuals.
It's just
After a certain date or certain time.
Correct.
Going into next year. Is that what you're planning?
Yes, sir. We do want to initially give an incentive to, I guess, to partake in that particular option. And if you don't, our district is in a situation where we would give you 12 months in advance to let you know that we would not be offering you a contract in 12 months.
So you're going to make that, getting back to the question where, the slide you showed us was an example of what we did in 2011, 2012, right? Not example, but it's the representation of what we undertook.
Yes, sir.
And that target, just to be sure, that's the number you were trying to reduce by in those various different groups.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At that
Now,
time.
the ones that didn't take it, what was the outcome of that? Did you end up moving forward and involuntary separate those folks? So when you look at the second group, I noticed those numbers aren't there anymore, like the teacher number wasn't there and a couple others. Is that what you're going to do? Is that what you're planning?
Well, phase 1 is the contract employees only, so they didn't get enough participation, so they opened it up to all full-time employees. And they got 109 total participants in phase 2. The executive leadership,
I guess-
go ahead, sir, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of lag, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
So the executive leadership team really needs to sit down with legal counsel and see what the rules of the game would be so that it is TRS compensable, any payouts and things like that. And continue with our timeline that I just discussed a little bit earlier, so to see what the interest is and see if we're going to get enough participants. But to Dr. Gonzalez's point, if we don't end up with enough participation, then we'll have to continue to, I guess, aim for our numbers that we need for
To
budgetary
work through
purposes.
attrition.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is obviously to work through attrition. Yes.
Always.
Well, you have your probationary 1, probationary 2, probationary 3. Is your plan that you need to, and the reason I'm asking this, and I think we need to harp a little bit on this somewhat, is in 2015, we had 25,108 students. That's what's showing on our site. And we had 33 campuses, which we now have less. And we had 3,265 employees, of which were 1,634 were teachers. Today, or as at the end of May, we had 20,210 students. But we have a current population, based on the slide you showed us a moment ago, of 3,381, which is more than we did when in 2015. And today, what I saw, your target is looking at reducing the number by 62. And that would bring us to 3,219, which is still a little bit lower, but
57.
Yeah.
32,
and I'm
57.
not, that's the concern. And I think part of it is when you look at your facilities and you're not able to combine classes because they're in different locations, I'm not sure you're going to get the most of what you're attempting to do. I think you have a couple of other moving parts you got to take into play. Because looking at other districts our size, they have as many as 300 or 400, and I'm being conservative, less staff. Now, obviously, I'm not going line by line, item by item, but it does concern me that we're still way above the 3,000 level with over 5,000 less students.
Yes, sir. And a big part of that is why, you know, the board and the administration over the years that you mentioned, we've closed Bonham, we've closed Nevada, we've closed Lincoln. So there's evidence there of effort on closing schools. But when you look at, there was a couple of years in there, I want to say it was maybe 2014, where we went away from blocks. Right, there was 2 years in there where blocks were taken out, so that required less teachers. Now the one thing that we did do back in those days is when we closed the blocks, we got away from math and reading teachers, but because of IB requirements, hired a couple, a language B, a little bit, you know, we went to the Spanish and elective side. So we kind of replaced core teachers with elective teachers. So now that we have select campuses that are IB, I think that we could look at our staffing model and run as lean as we can. But the way that the master schedules are set up right now, with the blocks and the extra planning, it's very hard to run as lean as we possibly could without the blocks. And obviously, as we've talked about, it is just that it would require a teacher instead of a math teacher teaching 3 blocks and 75 students, that teacher's going to teach 6 or 7 sections and teach 150 students. So that's part of the challenge, and that's what our neighbors do. If you look at surrounding districts, they don't have the extra planning period and they don't have the blocks. So that's where we know some inefficiencies. And I'm the first one to tell you, as a principal, I'm all for the blocks. I'm all for the second planning period. As a superintendent, I'm all for the blocks. I'm all for the second planning period. I'm all for that. I'm just saying it's an inefficiency that we knowingly and willingly work in to the tune of over $4 million a year. So part of that is the staffing.
I'm sorry, but you don't have blocks in the elementary schools, right?
No, just in the middle schools and in the diploma year program.
Okay, and I want to talk about what you just said in a minute. I think we all do, but I don't want to reflect the point I'm trying to make is that you have 4,000 empty seats in elementary schools. And so that, and so you're not able to consolidate those or leverage your resources there. And I think that's why our numbers in the waivers are so low, which is great. I mean, you want to have 22 or less at K through 4, and I think we've been able to achieve that because of the empty seats. And so I think you have maybe 1 or 2 at least facilities you ought to seriously look at as we move forward of consolidating, and therefore you will gain or be able to utilize the resources much more efficiently, requiring less teachers in those schools. That's the primary thing I wanted to emphasize before we get into the block. So unless everybody has a different perspective, and I'm not saying if you consolidate that you should dispose of it. I don't think we should dispose of any further elementary schools at this time. But I do think there's an opportunity. You only need, instead of 2 principals, 1, instead of 2 secretaries, 1, instead of 2 assistants, 1. I'm not saying today, but I think moving forward, that I think has to be part of your plan. Because you can't afford to have 40 empty seats and paying for staff, bringing us down to 3,200 when we lost 5,000 in the mix. It just doesn't add up.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, writing those notes. Another option is the voter approval tax rate election, the VATRE, which would possibly give us new tax revenues of $3,527,996. So what is a voter approval tax rate election? If we adopt a tax rate that exceeds the voter approval tax rate, and I'm going to use those words interchangeably because it's voter approval tax rate and voter approval tax rate election. So basically our tax rate is what we've already shown of $1, 1.0011. That is our voter approval tax rate right now. But if it were to exceed that amount, it would trigger a voter approved tax rate election. So, but those are the technical terms for those rates. It automatically holds an election for voters to approve the tax increase. last year, our tax rate was, maintenance and operation tax rate of $1.02, 0.0206. Our interest and sinking tax rate, which is for all our bonded debt, of 0.0758. Without election and with state compression, pending local, I have to say, because our final numbers come in August. We won't know how those turn out, but we are predicting they'd be right under the threshold for local compression. And because of all the protests that are going on and things like that, have a big effect. Our proposed maintenance and operations tax rate is 0.9338, a reduction of 0.0868 pennies. Proposed interest and sinking tax rate, because of our bonded debt decreasing, is now at 6.73 cents, a reduction of 0.85 cents. So in total, compared to last year, our tax rate would decrease by 9.53 cents. If we do a TRE and a voter VA TRE and it passes with the election, with the state compression, we could leverage a proposed maintenance and operation tax rate of 0.9758, which would increase by 4.14 pennies. Our tax rate in total will still decrease by 5.39 pennies, and our additional tax revenues at our predicted 96% collections, which historically we have met, is estimated at $3,527,996. The timeline for the VATRE, voter approval tax rate election. Of course, we would have to adopt a budget by June 30th. We would have to have selected our auditor for an efficiency audit no later than 4 months before election date, which is July 7th, which is why at the board meeting, it's there just in case that board chooses to select an efficiency auditor because of the timeline. July 25th, we have a deadline for our chief appraiser to provide our appraised values, our certified appraisals, which it could tell us we're subject to local compression or not, or we stay the same, which means that our tax rate remains. August 11th is the latest date that the district is planning a voter approval tax rate election to be published on the newspaper. We've already published on June 2nd, proposing our rate of 1.0011 for our tax rate. If we were to go this route, we would have to republish when that's the last date. And August 21st is the last day we can order an election for the November 7th uniform election date. Our efficiency audit must be completed by October 7th. And all the results for that audit would be posted on our website, as well as hold an open meeting to discuss those results. Now, there is a cost associated to a VATRE. Our estimated efficiency audit, you'll see that as part of our board meeting, the numbers came in a little lower, but just at the time we presented this is $30,000. And an election cost, that is a rough number because it would be a shared cost. This is an estimate based on the election that we just had for new board members, but this would be shared with other areas having an election at the same time. It's a uniform election, so there will be a percentage. So that's the worst case, election cost of $100,000.
So if our efficiency audit comes back and it's not good, not in our favor, we're already knee-deep in this. That comes back October the 7th, which gives voters a month to decide whether this is good or not. Shouldn't we have an efficiency audit before we go out for this so we know where all of that?
Yeah, so an efficiency, I could actually say it goes two ways, right? We do perform an efficiency audit. It lets us know, yay or nay, right? We did good or we didn't do good. But the election costs won't happen unless we hold the election. If we don't hold an election, then we don't have to pay the $100,000. But it does show us where we are efficient.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish before I say what else I gotta say.
Adele, just for the community to know, how much would those 4 pennies generate for the district?
$3.5 million.
And those $3.5 million would be used for staff compensation only. See, that's the thing, is that our community is going to experience a 9.53 pennies in tax decrease by compression. We already know that. So the community would still experience over 5 cents in savings. And we'd have over $3 million to compensate staff. And that's the only thing that the TRE would be used for. So if we do not go out for these pennies and our neighbors do, it's going to make it that much more difficult to compensate at the rate that our neighbors do. Because from what I'm gathering from my colleagues, vast majority of communities will be going out for TREs for compensation only. So I think that this is a perfect time for us, that this is administration, I believe that this is a perfect time for us to go out for a tax ratification election based on the circumstances that we're dealing with and based on what we've been through.
To Trustee Peña's point, though, we should know by now, we should, in an ideal situation, to be responsible, we should have had this done and anticipated this way before a July 7th deadline. That puts us with 1 month to inform the public, and hopefully our efficiency audit is favorable. So wouldn't this have been done a long time ago?
I can actually address that part. Yes, it should have been done a long time ago, but when you have a board, when 4 members are up for reelection and you bring up the word tax, people freeze. You know, it's a very scary thing. Even though the reality of this is we're not increasing taxes, we're decreasing taxes, people just kind of break. The moment they hear the word tax, they freak out, they freak out. They just like, oh, but they don't stop to listen. And so you're right, it's on the previous board before. We should have called for this a long time ago. As board members, there are only certain ways we can generate revenue for the school district. Enrollment, right? And we're trying really hard to get our enrollment up. Collection of our taxes, of our delinquent taxes. So we're constantly on our tax firm to, you know, get 100% of that collection rate. The state legislatures, which didn't do us any favors this year. And so the other avenue that we have is through property taxes. And usually we have to do that where we go out and we say we're going to increase your taxes. This is an opportunity. We're not going to increase their taxes. We're going to decrease your taxes, and we're going to keep 4 cents of the 9 cents, and we're going to, with that, we're going to raise $3 million that we should have actually gotten from the state legislators. We should have gotten in other avenues, but we didn't. And so now we're at the last possible moment, and so we're saying there's another way for trustees to look out in the community and say, this is a way that we can generate revenue. We're not voting today. This isn't a polling booth. We're not going in and voting how we personally feel, yay or nay to it. We're voting as a collective board to take this to the community and say, the community, look at this audit, which we're going to come out incredible. We always do. We're #1 in all these, you know, accounting things. We're great. We're an A district, and we're just incredible. And so we take all this out. We show them the audit. We show everything to the community. They make the decision, not us. They make the decision. They trust this board. They trust this staff. They believe in the community. They believe in teacher compensation. They believe that we need to pay our staff more. And so it's on them, vote it up, vote it down. But what this board is doing is we're not voting yes today, yes, I want to keep 5 cents or I want to keep 9 cents. We're voting to let the community make that decision, if that makes sense.
Madam President? if I
Yes.
may?
Yes.
Yes. Every year we're required to do an external audit of our operation. And now it's not an efficiency audit in the sense they look at a little bit more areas that they're required to in order to call a Bader. And so, but they do review our operations, and we've consistently done really well with the external audit that's been done. Second of all is we have an internal auditor, and part of the role of the internal auditor is to look at efficiencies of the operation, and as efficiency become known, or inefficiencies become known, is sharing that with the superintendent who's on the internal auditor committee, including the board president and other members of the board, and we meet on a quarterly basis. Now, I think there's plans to bring, as you know, we already had our board president has brought everybody into that interaction with the internal auditor, and I think she plans to see that on a more frequent basis so that we get to see what's happening within the organization. But we already have access. This board has access. This committee has access to those internal audit reports, which show the minimal inefficiencies, but more importantly, the corrections that are being done as we're moving forward. The third thing is, I think even if we had done an efficiency study, hired somebody to do it, I think by law, you're still required to hire someone at or before you call, soon before you call for a biter. I think you still would have been required to do that, even if you had done one 6 months ago. Because at that time, you would have just done a normal review of the efficiencies, whether internal or external auditor. But now you're specific hire for a specific reason, and that's to bring the information to the board to make a decision whether to proceed with a voter-approved tax ratification election. And I think that kind of summarizes, hopefully, that question. Thank you, Madam President.
And Madam President, I didn't mean that as a criticism of the previous board either, and so I just want to be clear about that. My concern is that it feels very rushed, and these decisions are obvious. I mean, you know better, everybody here knows better than I do that they're big decisions, and I just don't like how rushed it feels, and I don't like making this decision by July 7th, number one, and being exactly within the prescribed time by law that we have to do this. I want us to be set up to succeed, particularly if we go out for a TRE, and I don't think that we're setting ourselves up to do that when we do it at the last minute. Because I want to be able to be advocating for it as well. We need to be united if we do it, and I don't feel like I will be in a position to be a proper advocate in the community to get this passed. Not when we're going to get that information 30 days before the election.
The only issue that I see, and I agree, and we don't like to do anything rushed either, but there's a lot of moving parts. But we have one shot. We have an opportunity here for 4 pennies without raising taxes to our community to give our staff over $3 million in compensation this one time. So if there's any time to do it rushed, it's right now. Because if we don't, it's going to be very hard to compete with our neighbors, especially if we're not willing to cut those blocks out of the middle school and of the diploma year at IB. You know, and even if you look at some of the positions at the elementary, if you look at our literacy coaches or math interventionists or early literacy interventionists or level literacy interventionists, all of those positions are not 199 money. So it may throw off the staffing ratios a bit, but it's not coming out of local funds. So that's part of it on the elementary side. But we know without a doubt that the blocks are expensive and the extra planning period is expensive. And I said just a while ago, I'm all for it. I don't want to cut them out. It's part of our success. I see that. But at some point, if we're also going to say, and we're not going to go out for the 4 pennies because it feels rushed, and we're not going to cut this, but we want to be competitive with our neighbors, it makes it very hard in the administration. That's the hard part. So if there's any time to do it rushed, now's the time.
I will say that the reason that it feels rushed is because of if we wait until the following year, if we wait until a May election, actually we can't do it in May elections. We're only allowed by law to do it in November elections. If we do that, then we would be raising taxes in the community. We'd be going to the community saying we're going to raise your taxes by 4 cents. And that would be a really hard place for us to be in. Whereas in the place we're in right now, if we go out to the community and if they vote this in, we have that $3 million and it gives us options. If we decide to put that $3 million in our fund balance and we decide to cut the blocks and we decide to do all these other things, we can generate, we can get to $6 million, $9 million, tell us, we can have enough room to do a 7% raise. We can have enough, room to do a 4% raise instead of these little 1% raises, 2% raises, 3%. So if we keep all these plans in place, if we do all these cost reductions, if we freeze the travel, if we do this, if we do all these cost-saving measures, if we, as Trustee Saldivar mentioned, start looking at all these different efficiencies and where we need, if we do that over the next year, and we have these 4 pennies that the community hopefully will trust us with and vote to allow us to keep, we'll have a lot of options. If we don't do it, our options are we're going to have to let 100 staff members go, because we're not going to have the money. We're not going to be generating money through enrollment to put in our fund balance. If we don't have money to put into our fund balance, the very following year, we're not going to have enough money for raises. So next year, we're going to be in the exact same position. Actually, we're going to be in a worse position than we are now, because if enrollment is declining and we're not keeping the money that we're keeping now, because right now we're keeping 1.09 cents of the tax rate. If we don't have that, and we're not going to have it, if we don't have that, and we don't have enrollment, and we don't have all these things, next year is going to be far worse than we are this year. And hopefully the community will see that we're an A-rated district and we put everything we can into our students. And yes, during COVID, we kept a lot of staff. And I know, Matt Wilson called me from the Monitor and he was like, you have a lot of staff. I'm like, but that was the secret sauce. That was the secret sauce that made sure that our kids were being pulled out for math, pulled out for English, pulled out. We had all these extra staff members because we were afraid of this learning, they were going to lose learning during COVID, and so we kept all that. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of money for staffing, and we have a lot of staff, to Trustee Saldivar's, that we need to start cutting back on. But if we don't keep part of this tax money, if we give all of it back, and if we, I mean, it scares me to think of the position that the next board is gonna be in a year from now, and 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I see this as an opportunity. I know that, you know, personally, I don't know how people will vote once they go into the you know, to cast your, you're in the polling location to cast how you personally feel about taxes. But as trustees, I feel like we have to put on our trustee cap and look at this as how do we generate revenue for the school district? This is a way to generate revenue. At the same time, keeping administration, keeping them, you know, on top of them, like everyone was saying, like, let's meet every month about cutting. We've got to cut. But even with all those cuts, we're not going to have the money to do raises if we don't keep our pennies. That's just my 2 cents. Trustee Salazar, were you trying to break in?
I need to break in
I was
too.
waiting my turn whenever.
No, go ahead. This is a workshop. So
If it's my turn, I will. I just want clarification. The TRE that we're talking about for November will not help us on this budget. It has nothing to do with this budget unless, because if you start collecting it in January of 2024, and if you collect enough, you could make a budget amendment in the spring to make some adjustments if you want, or wait until May and include it in the 24-25 budget. But if it passes in November, you can't retroactively now use whatever because you haven't collected anything in November. I
Yes.
just want to make that clear. It's my understanding of how this works.
So yes, you can actually do retro for this. So what would happen is if it passes, we would present a budget amendment saying we predict this much revenue would be coming in, and it would go into compensation. So our adjustment would be a payroll amendment, increase in revenue, increase in the payroll portion, and we can retro it back. So they'll get one hit, not one hit, but one good lump sum to catch them up until it passes, preferably maybe December before we start the new year. And then the rest would come in as the monthly salary comes in to play.
Now, how much are you planning to use of the $3.5 million projected generated from this?
You know, based on that,
For this year?
we did a voter approval, an increase option. This is just an option. Teachers and librarians of 2.5%. That would be an increase of $1,420. Administration education as well as administration management of 1%, and clerical, technical, instructional support, and auxiliary of 2%. That is a total increase of $3,934,079.
All right, so how's that gonna help us next year? Because we already, in other words, you capped already because you're gonna be generating 3.5 million, more or less, depending on values year after year going forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've already, you maxed it out for this year. So how are we gonna generate additional to go
it's
next year?
It's not on top of, it wouldn't be an additional 3.5 every single year. What happens is this increase will then be sustained. It'll be paying for itself going, because we got the 4 pennies. But we stay on course. We stay on course cutting our staff. We stay on course on our efficiencies, right? We stay with our cost savings plan.
Exactly, I mean, it doesn't take you, everything else still has to be in play.
Yes,
And
yes,
it has to be in play year after year from
Correct.
now on. Because if we back off like we did in 2011, 2012, thinking, okay, we weathered the storm and we went back to business as usual with no follow-up. I mean, that's where we are.
Yes.
Forget the COVID thing.
Why-
That happened.
Sam, if I can
I
interrupt.
will say one last thing about this, because I pushed for this last year, and didn't get any traction. So to trustee Regalato's point, this would have already been done before he even got here, but that's water under the bridge. Be there, we got to deal with the reality here. But I will tell you the consistent message I'm getting from voters out there, especially the 70, 80 percentile that have no kids in the district. And they say, wait a minute, 12 cents is 12 cents. And their mindset, the state of Texas is doing this compression, and so they're trying to find tax relief. So the bottom line, the general feeling is this: why is for not watching this, and your problem for not taking charge and taking care of this before now becomes my problem.
Okay,
That's the undercurrent you're gonna be hearing.
let Lizzie speak.
And add to that, Trustee Saldivar, because I'm feeling so 50-50, because initially when I hear 100% going to teacher raises, I'm feeling very, very excited about it, but after speaking with teachers, and it seems like with a new board, we haven't quite established trust yet with the community, whatever has happened in the past few years. And now we're asking for a lifeline from our community to save us from, like you said, the problems that we've created for ourselves. So that makes me feel like, hey, let's make some efficiency moves, just like what we've been talking about throughout this meeting, and establish that trust again before we ask them again to help the issue that we've been having.
If I may,
Yeah.
I just wanted.
Wanting to speak,
I'm
so,
sorry.
no, go, finish.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I feel like, one, it is too rushed. Why haven't we done an efficiency study? Remind me? Why haven't we done
It's
one?
part of a TRE election.
Okay.
It's required.
It's required
We
for
should
Victoria.
actually do one, without having to, we're going to do it now, because we're really not going to have the results till the month before. And yes, our audits are always great, and great team, and all your efforts. And I know we've put you through a lot the last couple of months here trying to get to this budget. But I feel like, what if something comes up there? We didn't get here overnight. We got here by spending, adding positions. Attrition is something we're going to have to go through regardless of whether we do this TRE or not. Attrition still has to happen. So that's not going to stop. It's not going to stop the fact that some positions got to go. Some people are going to maybe retire early. Maybe they're not. But I said it then, and I'll say it again. We can't spend like we've been spending. And I'm not going to forget where we were this morning at UTRGV. Beautiful ceremony, all smiles, smile for the picture and everything. How are we going to fund that? We still don't know, and that's not cheap. And I'd like a number on that, please. That's right. You provided it. I'm sorry. But I feel like we're putting a Band-Aid on this issue right now. Putting a little Band-Aid on this issue. I don't want to go to the community and ask them to bail us out. And that's exactly what we're doing. We did not get here overnight. I did not support this last time, and I still don't support it today.
Ms. Felix, can you explain maybe to everybody how once we set the tax rate, then you can't go back and get those 4 pennies?
Right.
No, through an election only. So what would happen, well, it's funny because we did pass a TRE right before HB3, then took it away,
back,
right?
right.
So if we pass this election, we will be able to leverage the 4 pennies that some other districts already have the 17 cents, up to the max. We are at enrichment pennies of 12.86 cents. We can leverage 4.14 pennies that could be beneficial just going forward. Now, if we were to go and ask for a 4 pennies and do nothing with it just to help our fund balance, that's not going to get it passed, right? So, but to be able to do 2 things, get the most we can out of what's available and provide a compensation increase.
But as Madam Chair alluded to, that if we wait, then it's going to be a cost.
Yes.
It could be a tax.
Increase.
Right now, we are seeing a drop of 9 pennies.
Right.
We could drop by 5 pennies. Now, let's say next year our compression isn't as high. It could be netting to increase our tax rate.
Right.
It would, if we were to go for an election in a subsequent year where our compression didn't decrease as much.
Everything is a contingency. Everything is a contingency. If this happens, what if it doesn't pass?
Well, if it doesn't pass, it wouldn't be a cost increase to us because we wouldn't be able to give the compensation increase. So therefore, it stays the course. We do one of the options that we present, but this goes out there. If they vote it down, then there's no compensation increase.
So if they vote it down and we need a bond, which we could do together, we could do a bond and a TRE together in the future because we are going to need a bond. Let's say our TRE doesn't not pass. And then a couple of years from down the road, I mean, some of our schools are really old. Mac High, how many times has the public called us about Mac High? if we don't pass a TRE, a bond is definitely not going to pass.
If I may, Mrs. President. And I agree. I think that if we're at a point where we're experiencing a 9-cent compression and we're asking the voters for 4 pennies that they weren't going to get back to, so instead of getting 9 pennies, we're asking the voters to get 5. And then we're telling the staff that the $3-point-some million that we're going to generate in the TRE is going to be used for staff compensation only. If we can't pass that, then we better not go for a bond. Because, I mean, I believe with all my heart that we can get out there and get it done and we can pass it. I think we can come together and do that. As far as how we got ourselves into this situation, you got to look at the history of declining birth rates. You got to look at the cost of living in McAllen. We're 49 square miles that are landlocked. I mean, we're in a situation now where we have private charters, we have homeschooling, we have more competition, we have open enrollment. You may not agree, but those are facts. So it just seems like we're in a situation where we're saying we don't know how we got to this point. Well, I think we do know how we got to this point. And now we're asking to work as a team to get out of it. That's all it is. But I mean, to be...
I'm not saying we don't know how we got to this point. We've been spending a lot of money on special projects to this point. Enrollment hasn't gone up, no, the birth rates haven't gone, none of that helps. The way we're funded doesn't help, but we can't rely on the legislature to do the right thing. They just did not do the right thing a month ago, so we can't rely on that.
So to that end, I like what Trustee De La Garza reminded me about, and to what Trustee Pena said, the state didn't do anything, but they have an avenue where we can do something. So a lot of people read it on the Facebook. Mission ISD had these big raises, and everybody's calling us. Well, Mission ISD collects all 17 cents. We don't. We're not.
1,000 less employees than we do. We've only 4,000 left.
Okay.
In population.
So they have avenues. Other people have avenues of collecting money. And as trustees, we need to look at all the avenues that are available to collect money for the district. And I see this, the county just had the opportunity to give back pennies to us, and they kept it. They came for the same thing. They didn't call it a TRE. They called it an actual bond because they wanted to keep those pennies that we were due. We were due back pennies, and they needed them for drainage because the state was also messing with their funding. And so they went out to the community. They didn't make the decision. They let the voters make the decision. And the voters looked at it and said, yes, we think drainage is an issue, and the voters voted it up. I think what administration is doing here today, and the reason Trustee Saldivar asked for this last year and asked for it to be on the agenda this year as well, is because it is an avenue that allows us to increase, to generate revenue. And we don't have to personally vote yes for it. The community needs to have the ability. They need to talk about it. They need to come to the workshops that will be presented. This is going to be a learning thing for everybody. Everybody's going to be learning. Everyone's going to have, there's going to be town halls. There's going to be all sorts of opportunities to get information, to get data, to get everybody. But if we don't do this at the 3 o'clock meeting, if we don't vote this up at this level, it stops with us. And we don't give the community, we don't give our staff the ability to vote on it. We don't give the community members, the people that live in this city, the people whose children are in our school districts, we don't give them the opportunity to voice their opinion in the matter of their vote. And so that's why I'm really trying to convince everybody to, your personal decisions, I get and I hear and I understand and I appreciate. But I think that this is something that the community, that the employees in the school district need to be able to vote on, the community needs to be able to vote on, the mayor, the city commissioners, the county, commissioners. Everybody needs to hear our story. They need to hear what we're going to do with this money, and they need to decide if we should keep these 4 pennies or not. But it would put us more on a level playing field with Mission and Edinburgh and surrounding school districts, because we're not collecting what we could. The max is 17 cents. We could jump up to the max if we went up, but we're not. We're not at the max. We've always been really low in McAllen. We've always been a very low tax rate, and this still keeps us at a low tax rate. We're still lowering taxes. That's my 2 cents. Trustee Kittle, and go ahead.
This is tied to another election, right? Did we say that or no?
November.
No, November.
In November. This would be, everybody would be having town halls and working on it, and the election is in May. There's all these things that, in November. There's all these things that have to take place by procedure, by law, by compliancy things, and the election would be in November. And
So
you.
this is an off year, this is an off year.
Standalone then, it's a standalone election that we have.
Well, for the city, unless the city of McAllen's holding other elections, unless there's elections, if there was a governor election, if there was it might be a standalone, it might be the only thing on the ballot, but there might be other issues on the other propositions, other things on the ballot. I don't know.
It also depends who we use. If we do it with the city,
Right.
then it's just our ballot. But if we use the county, then these other TREs are gonna be on there. Now, you won't be able to vote on it, but there'll be all these other things taking place and any vacancies that may be up. But it's an off year, so it's not a presidential election. There's not
Yeah.
that happening right now.
Yeah, but by law,
If I-
go ahead, Trustee Salvar.
Go ahead.
Come on.
Yes.
The answer to the questions I was getting, and especially folks that know I'm a fiscal conservative, is I point out to them that when the TRE passed and the state changed the formula and we no longer were going to get that $7,000 a year from the state, the district could have held on to that penny, but we chose not to. We gave it back to the community.
Yes.
So that brought our tax rate down from what could have been $1.16.50 to $1.15.50. And so right there in of itself, the body corporate demonstrated that we were being prudent, saying, let's give this tax relief back to the taxpayer at that time. And we did. And this is before the most recent situation that occurred with House Bill 3, which then began this compression to occur. And so we all know how we got here. So, and we can explain it how we got here for the most part. The thing is, could we have taken other steps as we moved along and maybe not have built as many things as we did? Because from 2015 to 2020, we spent $54 million on projects through two maintenance tax notes, through at least one, maybe two declared disasters, and then also funding that we allowed for dealing with air conditioning units and the like to maintaining the life cycle. So I have a spreadsheet I got from the district that in those 5 years we spent $54 million doing for that reason. And since then we've spent an additional $55 million, and we currently have $45 million in reserve with contracts to complete projects that we've already. So yeah, when you add that in the aggregate, that's a lot of expenditure on facilities and things of that nature that we should have spent more and held more in reserve to take care of our teachers. So the only reason I tell folks, because they're surprised I would even call for this, because I'm for tax cutting, but it's because it goes directly towards compensation of our teachers and staff, and that's the only reason. But I will only agree to that if we do the other necessary things that we have to do going forward. And that's where I'm a little leery about, is there a lot of promises in here, but unfortunately, that's where we are.
To that end, Trustee Saldivar, I'm going to bring everybody back into our agenda. Let's all go to page 12. Ms. Felix, if you want to continue on the presentation.
This was an option if a VATRE were to move forward. And then the financial effect. We currently have a budget deficit covered by assigned fund balance, so it is a balanced budget, which our predictions were in the green as the phase one, our current stage, the effects of a hiring freeze, the stipend savings, the overtime plan, staff travel plan, as well as an 8% department cut. We're coming in at over $1.8 million. However, we are continuing with phase two, adding, and of course, we will find any efficiencies moving forward because that is our goal, ultimate goal. If we were to go for the voter-approved tax rate election, proposed raise, as was the previous slide, was $3.9 million. A past election would result in new revenues of $3.5 million, and a proposed cost of an election would be, and an efficiency audit, about $130, still leaving us in the black, $1.3 million. And if we go back to, this is the infamous analysis that has been thrown around, that we have 3.24 days in excess, projected days in excess of our fund balance. And from our last workshop, we discussed a one-time longevity pay, scenario 1, which is tiered different between teachers and librarians, increments of 500 based on your years of experience here, years with the district, I'm sorry. 5 plus of 500, 10 plus of 1,000, 15 plus of 1,500, 20 plus of 2,000, which a total cost of $1.3 million. Other employees would be in increments of 250, starting at 5 plus at 250, 10 plus of $500, 15 plus of 750, and 20 plus of 1,000 for a total of $700,000. The total cost of these two combined would be $2,042,000, which would leave about $200,000 left over for excess, because this would be a one-time, as it would be a direct reduction from unassigned fund balance. The last scenario that we brought up at the last workshop was the same longevity pay of $2 million, as well as a slight increase in a compensation of 0.5, which equates to 285 raise, a 0.5 to admin education as well as management, and 1% to clerical, technical, instructional support, and auxiliary. A total cost of $1,177,000, which would take us over at $3.2 million. And that is
Can we bring up something?
As long as it's on the agenda. Yes, Trustee Saldivar.
Do you want to finish something first, Madam President, or?
No, that was the end of her slide. So you said you wanted to bring up something, and I said, yes, as long as it's on the agenda, please bring it up.
All right. I still stand that I think we should look at, again, I'm compromised. I still believe it should be a 2% salary increase for staff. And I proposed the other day a 1%, and I'm seeing a 0.5. And so I would vote for this if it gets to a 1%. And I prefer it be like HB3 calls for, which is teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses. That's House Bill 3. So if any subsequent legislation were to be passed, those 4 individuals get automatically 75% of the 30%. But for compromise purposes, again, if it's just going to, if it becomes a strain, I'm all right with teachers and librarians as listed, but I feel it should be 1%.
The cost of that, I have. The cost of a 1%, which equates to 565, would be, and all others as well as that 1%, which would be $3.9 million.
That includes.
I've looked at the entire budget and every which way. You'll be able to, if you do these things that we're talking about, if you do some other things I've talked to the superintendent about, for example, this past year we lost $4 million because our ADA in the elementary levels was far lower than we anticipated. If you only do 25% recovery there, and I know you'll do better than that, that takes care of that million addition right there before we even get to December. And so I think if we're asking people, we ask teachers to do their part, to turn it up a notch, and they did, and staff. We say that this is a district of champions. Well, they all championed our kids all year, and we say we're family. Then I don't know about your family. My family, we do what it takes to help our family, and I think it's a small sacrifice in the very short term to do that, even for that additional amount to these folks, and it goes a long way as we continue to move forward.
I feel like this is a Band-Aid situation. We're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, I realize what Madam President Aliceda is saying here, and we should give it to the voters it's a very short turnaround. And if we can't convince the voters that this is the right thing to do, or this is what they need to do to get us out of the hole, it's a no. We're still going to deal with attrition whether we pass it or don't pass it. So attrition still happens. People are still going to have that 1 year notice that they're not going to get a contract. That doesn't go away. I'm all about making sure our teachers have what they need. I don't want to sacrifice the extra planning period because that's important to teachers. I don't want to compromise anything that has made this district as excellent as we are. But we've done all of that, and it put us in this situation last year, probably before that too, and before that. Continued to spend on special projects. I'm going to tell you right now, if next week, if we vote this in and next week we get a special project on our table, I am going to lose my mind. I really am.
But on these scenarios, I mean, this is scenario, right, Trustee Saldivar, I think you're on the same page. Like, this is for today. This is with this isn't TRE. We can, based on all the savings that have been brought up, I think it was in the beginning of the packet.
Yeah,
We can afford this now. The 2.2 plus the 1% gets us to 3.9. We can get there today, not even approving a TRE right now, but we can get there. I mean, this isn't tied to the TRE. So I think we need to look at the one we came up with last week, scenario 2 was great. I completely agree with Trustee Saldivar. I would be all in favor for 2%, but again, where do we find that other $1 million next year without severe cuts? So to be comfortable now, I do like the scenario 3, no TRE attached to it. This is scenario 3. We can approve it today. And I would challenge administration that every meeting, whether it be at the top of our HR packet or whatever, we have total number of employees, and we want to continue to see where that is and what direction it's going to, in addition to enrollment numbers, because I think that is something we definitely need to keep our eye on, because that is something I noticed in our packet that, yes, our number of employees is still higher than what it was a couple of years back. But I think it's moving in the right direction. So I think that this is a great solution given all the situations that we have inherited from the prior board.
But at 3.9, we can't afford that without dipping into the fund balance.
Correct, but with our cost savings that we're trying to do, see, so it's all that
It'll
combination.
balance.
We won't be, we're not in a hole. If we
Right.
do more than that, we'll go to a hole.
And can we clarify that as far as, I know there is a real estate transaction like November. So if we were to dip some and then that money is to be put back after the sale, like, is there a timing when we get rated, or how does that work?
It's at the end of our annual, so June 30th is our ending year, so that would be our audit period. So then the results of our audit will then trigger our first. So
Okay.
we're going to be okay this year,
Okay.
right?
And then with
we
the
have to
sale,
work-
we'll replenish whatever is removed. And so we'll be good. And the continual
efforts from
efforts that we are working on, and I think more will continue to come out. You know, I completely agree there needs to be some consolidation of elementaries. It's inevitable, and that is going to be a long process to look at. But in addition, looking at, turning off the lights at Crockett, keeping PD there, and then moving other departments to other areas, whether it be Wilson or other schools that are a little bit lower enrollment, until we figure out solutions. But I think this is a great compromise, Trustee Saldivar, and without a TRE, I think this is a good effort. on our behalf, but it's going to take the administration and the team's continual efforts to show that we are working in the right directions to continue to build that trust with our voters. Because if you look at, we have 3,381 employees. I mean, that's more people than voted in the last election. So if we can't even get our staff to vote for trustees, I mean, we really need to make sure that they understand.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a real good point.
I think we really need to have a really great effort at, what we do going forward.
And if I may, I do appreciate all the dialogue. It's helping us tremendously, and administration does feel comfortable with scenario 3 with the 1%. And again, strongly encourage our board to highly consider a tax ratification election in the future, in the near future.
To be clear, though, the administration wasn't coming to us with scenario 3 today, correct?
No.
So, and realistically, without contingencies, scenario 3, without counting on something that we don't know for sure, we cannot afford that with our excess fund balance, because our excess fund balance is 2,234,000.
Yes.
Right, that's why they were recommending scenario.
But we feel comfortable that when the dust settles and we get through the sale of property and we get through hopefully a tax ratification election in the near future, if the board goes for that. If the board does not go for that, then we feel comfortable with scenario 3. We'll continue to cut positions through attrition. I think the team did a great job saving over $842,000 in cuts now where nobody lost their jobs. We downsized positions to include the executive leadership team. So we're looking at, yes, scenario 3 is 1%, sir.
But the administration's recommendation today was option.
0.5.
Scenario 2, 0.5.
That was just
And
a
so-
recommendation.
When we're thinking about that scenario 2 at 0.5, and teachers and librarians are going to get $285 extra dollars, but that's going to more than deplete, that's going to require us to dip into our fund balance.
But the plan, yes. So if we look at this as a whole of 3.2 and compare it to our 2.2, yes. However, with our plans of everything else and continue to push as the entire process, making every effort that we have in all those avenues. Because not only do we have to, it basically increases what we have to find for the future, because we've been tasked with the deficit as well as any potential. So it adds to it. But our plan keeps going. We go what we need to do.
Yeah, we're going to continue to right-size our district. Now there are some positions that come from federal funds that we use as leverage with regard to reading interventionists, math interventionists, emotional quotient specialists, things that we know we need, but it doesn't come out of the 199. So what we need to do is we need to do a better job painting a picture of what positions are coming out of local and what positions are not. That way we don't get this perception, because sometimes just like the block and just like the extra planning period, those are inefficiencies that are worked in on purpose. So we know that the reading interventionist is an extra position, but it doesn't come from local dollars. We know that the math interventionist is an extra position. So it makes us look heavy, but there's a lot of kids out there counting on us on the reteach aspect of what we do to get them to where they need to be. So all of that to say we'll continue to be as efficient as possible and cut back through attrition from this year forward.
And also your ADA. I mean, if you just do the ADA to middle school, you're there.
Yes,
and that
sir.
doesn't even count the bottom price. So just those two things, you will get the $2 million back by December.
Yes, sir.
Not to mention the fact you're going to continue working on membership growth. And so that's going to take you into September. So while you're simultaneously, as Trustee Delgado Lopez has shown us our chart, we have to line up the trajectory of much better position of growth, or stability, and cost. And so if you put that on line, and I know you, Dr. Gonzalez, you and your staff, you work on a challenge. So your challenge is that what we look like in the spring going into next year. The challenge is day one when we start school, or when July 1st of this year, you're going to hit the ground running to find the $2 million this year, take care of it next year, and address going forward with everything that's in play in this conversation.
Yes, sir. We will not let this board We will not let this community, or we will not let our student body down. We're going to work our tails off. You have our word.
I do have one question real quick, if I may. The block, did you have the block, the 2 years that we got A's back-to-back prior to 2019, the COVID, were you using block already at that time?
Yes, sir.
So the block had already proven itself pre-pandemic. And all you did was you added roughly 108 individuals using ESSER funds, of which many of them are in a support role, and some are direct, to kind of deal with the slide, as everybody called it.
Yes, sir.
Post-pandemic.
Yes, sir.
But the core of what got you here was pre-COVID, putting the systems and processes in place and bearing that cost at that time.
Yes, sir. We scored, not only did we score the 95% coming out of a world pandemic, but we scored 100% on domain 3, which essentially means every kid in our district grew. And a big part of that is the base that we set at the elementary, the blocks that we have at the middle school, and our high school teachers really finishing off strong, whether it's our comprehensives, our IB, or Achieve. So the formula is there. That's why we don't want to mess with it. The last thing we want to do is cut back on those planning periods, because our teachers do utilize them. It's not extra time to relax. They utilize that time for planning, and we know that we get that return on the investment. So I did want to make it very clear to the teachers that we do know that the extra planning period and the blocks work. We know that. But it would be irresponsible of the administration not to let my bosses, not to let the board know that these are inefficiencies that we're working in, so that our board can make decisions on whether we want to cut back, because we're looking at $4 million every year with those two moves.
That $4 million, and how much is that? Is it the 108, or is it an additional amount of that?
No, it
108 is
is,
the ESSER folks, so that'll be taken care of at the end of this coming year.
It's addition to that.
it's 28 plus 48.
How many?
28 plus 48, so 76 teachers.
76 teachers.
7-6.
But, okay, thank you,
Yeah, it's page 6 of the presentation.
thank you.
May I?
No, please.
So I'm receiving it as if these 4 pennies are going to disappear this year if we don't use them, but that's not true, right?
No, we could go out for an election.
Okay. And so what I want to know is from the administration between options 1 and 2, without assuming that there is no tax ratification election, what is the recommendation?
Based on this discussion, option that increases the pay by 1%. Based on the discussion we had, we came in with a 0.5. We feel comfortable that we can save inefficiencies moving forward, even if we didn't go out for a tax ratification election. It doesn't mean that we can't go out for a TRE in the future, but what it means is the voter would have already experienced 9 cents in compression, a 9 cents tax break. Now we're going to ask them for those pennies back, as opposed to the voter getting a 5-cent decrease instead of 9. So the voter experiences 5 cents in decrease in taxes instead of 9. But it's much different if they give you 9 cents back and then ask you for 4. So I think the timing is right now, and we're in a position where I believe if we work with our teachers and our community, I believe that we can get out there and we can get this done. The last time we went out for a tax ratification election, we passed it with 75% voter approval, and I believe we can do it again.
I think what Trustee Regalado is saying, though, is administration recommending scenario 1, or are they recommending scenario 2? Because the board's the one that's asking for scenario 3, but what is administration recommending?
We came in at 0.5 based on our discussions, but a lot of our discussions are based on our discussions. Once we get out with our board and we start to get the different perspectives, that's what you guys are here for, to give us different perspectives, to give us different challenges, to speak on behalf of the community. So once we had this dialogue and working back and forth, we feel comfortable with what our board is asking. We believe that scenario 3 will work. So yes, we came in with one scenario and a 0.5, but we feel comfortable now that we've had this discussion. So we all know the challenge moving forward. So
Now, you also recommended taking off the planning period.
yes,
And so we haven't even discussed that. So, I mean, you kind of hedged yourself there because you prefer keeping it, but you're recommending that. But if this board is so inclined not to, I mean, that's the whole point of the workshop.
That's
Let's
it.
come in here and rubber stamp a recommendation. Say, I mean, this is a lot of conversation around discussion, and I would not make this suggestion if I knew it jeopardized question number 6 on the first, which it will not. And I would not make this recommendation if I hadn't done the budget crunch and had the conversation with Ms. Phoenix and yourself, that conservatively, you're gonna recover that money this year and next year, regardless of the TRE.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No doubt.
And as far as the block, and going back to my point, we don't want to hold anything back from our board and our community. So for us to know that the extra planning period in the block costs us $4 million, in being transparent, we have to put that out there, agree with it or not. But at the end of the day, we know that as a community and a team of 8, we're investing that money and we're getting a return. We're one of the highest performing school districts in the state of Texas, based on data, not my opinion. And a big part of that is the academic plan that we have in place. So it just proves that even the highest performing school districts in the state are in crisis right now when it comes to finances. Because we are one of the highest performing school districts in the state of Texas.
I see it as an opportunity. I don't see it as a crisis, but it is a financial strain. It
Yeah.
is. And crisis is a fair word. But I see it more as an opportunity to prioritize our systems and processes, our operations, so that it ensures going forward that we're effectively and consistently providing a quality education to each and every child, each and every day. And this discussion is going to allow us to do that.
I agree.
All right, board, do y'all have any more questions or comments, or would you like to go ahead and close out this meeting and take a little break?
One
Go
more.
ahead.
Declared disaster. If we were to declare that this year, we would reap that benefit 2024?
So because of the winds that we sustained a lot of damage, we can't claim it for tax year 24. We'd have to claim it for tax year 25.
Okay, that was all.
And that's a one-time, 4 pennies.
Does anybody else have anything that they'd,
What did we decide on I'm not for changing the instructional core or the planning period, but, so that's, even though the superintendent recommended, our position is, I hope, not going forward with our recommendation. We're gonna leave the planning periods in place.
I hope so.
That was just an option, again, that we wanted to present, not necessarily a recommendation. We just wanted to lay our cards on the table flat so that the community and this board knows that nobody really has to come in and tell us where our inefficiencies are. We know that where that one is, and if the board is saying, no, we would rather not go down that path, then that's fine. I think that, again, it's part of our academic plan. So I think it was more of a option than it was a recommendation at this point.
so I guess what trustee Saldivar is saying,
Everything is an option.
yeah. So that's, when we come back at 3 o'clock and we're voting on the budget includes the planning period. That's part of the budget, it hasn't been taken away.
It
The only
hasn't
thing
been
that's been
taken
taken away
away.
is the
It is in there.
stipends. Right,
Yes.
right, okay.
So
I think
that
that's what
one
trustee-
slide that put it out there, what did it say, options or?
Yes.
It
Oh,
was just
sorry, I thought it
cost-saving
was-
options,
it
but it's
says
not part of the
options.
budget that we're voting on.
Cost-saving plan.
It's an option that you're presenting to us,
Options.
but it's not a recommendation.
Right, it's just
And
options.
And
not
it's
part of
not
the budget that
reflected
we
on
vote.
our
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
And the
Now,
long-term
the budget's gonna have the
substitute.
1%?
Adele,
I'm sorry?
he's asking if the budget has 1%.
No, the current budget has no increase in compensation. What would happen, it would be an amendment coming in the new year.
Well, no, we're approving option 3, which is a 1%, so how's that worded in the budget?
The compensation plan would include that, and our book we would change an executive summary detailing that really quickly within the break that we have here, so the book would reflect that as part of the approval process. And then we'll come in with
an.
an,
Put as amended, okay, when we approve
yes,
the budget today?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so then we need some time. So if there's no further questions, everyone's feeling good with the workshop? All your questions have been answered?
As far as that, you had a substitute question for the long-term, because of the amount is only about 30,000, it would be a amendment. Once we start to see that the cost of those, like, we can run the play. We run the play that route, and then once we start to see that it's over, because we don't want to go over our 1.2, and hopefully we don't go over our 1.2 in budgeted amounts. but if we do, it's by the estimated 30,000.
Okay.
And we'll see that.
I just don't want it to fall through the cracks.
Yeah, so there'll be a process that Human Resources will enact
Okay, thank you.
with our payroll department, yes.
Okay, well, on that, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn our 1 PM board workshop.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by trustee De La Garza, seconded by trustee Rivera to adjourn our 1 PM board workshop. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We are now adjourned.